This was the environment that the Watchmen was speaking to and commenting on. Now, I don't want to leave you with the impression that this was the first time a comic book had danced upon political territory, because Amazing Spider-Man 96 through 98 tackled drugs when the Comics Code said you couldn't even mention them. So Stan Lee ran the issues without the Comics Code. Insert gasp of horror here. And let's not forget the old Green Lantern, Green Arrow stories that Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams were doing back in the 70s. Most famously, of course, GL number 76, where the man on the street chastises Hal Jordan for heading off into space to help out the orange skins and the blue skins and the purple skins. You never seem to do anything back at home for the black skins. And Green Lantern had nothing. The point is that, yes, there was political and social commentary in comic books before, but in the mainstream they were still light and fuzzy bunnies that made you feel safe at the end of it. Watchmen was social commentary with the safety off. It dealt unflinchingly with racism, paranoia, mental illness, rape, domestic violence, sexual dysfunction, and kinky sex with multiple blue men. Watchmen was psychologically dark on a level the medium had never seen before. Now, comics had Wolverine, who wasn't afraid to get a little blood on his claws in order to get the job done. Punisher was so hardcore he'd shoot Archie in the face. But Rorschach was a card-carrying nihilist, so cynical and so contagious he went to a state-appointed therapist and made that guy crazy. Don't mistake this book for a mindless splatterfest, though. It broke the mold in that it was a top-selling comic book that you could also teach in a college classroom. It was packed with symbolism, beginning with that smiley face that adorned the first issue. Just what was that joke the comedian was always referring to? Plus, things keep getting thrown out of windows. It starts with the comedian taking his final flop. There's Rorschach defenestrating himself. Here's Rorschach throwing a perfectly good dead dog through a window as well. I mean, that's got to mean something, right? Watchmen was about paranoia, nostalgia, hope, humanity, and especially power. Each issue had multiple somethings to puzzle over, deconstruct, argue about. This was not something that you did with an issue of Superman. Finally, the book was experimental in style, theme, and format. Moore layered a pirate story within his superhero mystery in the form of Black Freighter, and the concerns of that shipwrecked pirate tend to mirror the concerns of the main storyline. Kinda cool, definitely different. Who else was even attempting layered structure?
Whether you fully appreciated the experimental technique or not, Alan Moore was clearly pushing the envelope further than anyone had ever gone before. He was truly a master at the top of his game. The end result was that the Watchmen enjoyed an unprecedented level of critical and financial success.
The Watchmen gained instant recognition from the comics community, winning a Jack Kirby Award in 1987 as the best writer-artist combo in the industry that year, and then an Eisner Award the next. But it wasn't just the comic book readers who were taking notice of the landmark series. In 1988, The Watchmen received a Hugo Award, science fiction's most prestigious accolade. Comics were now officially literature. Time magazine named Watchmen one of the 100 best English-language novels since 1923. It was the only comic so honored. Now, granted, they might be a little biased given that Warner Brothers owns DC and all, but still. Watchmen was also financially successful. The series is now more than 20 years old, and it has never gone out of print. Not only is it by far the best-selling collection in the history of comics, but remarkably, Diamond reported that Watchmen was the #1 selling graphic novel for the months of July, August, and September of 2008.
Okay, think about that for 12 seconds. In 1986, your top-grossing films are Crocodile Dundee and Top Gun. Your top-selling albums are Madonna's True Blue and Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet. Think you'd buy a ticket to see Crocodile Dundee today? When's the last time you saw anybody buy Slippery When Wet? Watchmen is still #1. It's incredible when you think about it.
So with all the accolades and record-breaking sales, it was really just a matter of time before the Watchmen grabbed Hollywood's attention. With the Spider-Man films breaking the $300 million barrier each, and The Dark Knight hitting the $1 billion mark when you count international sales, how much money would Comics' masterpiece bring in? We're about to find out starting March 6th at a theater near you. But the road from page to cinema was a difficult one for the Watchmen, and for its author, Alan Moore.
Okay, so there's an 800-pound gorilla in the room that we haven't gotten around to yet. You see, according to Alan Moore and some of the Watchmen's most ardent supporters, this comic book is completely unfilmable. Now, it might seem a bit strange to say that at first blush, seeing as how Zack Snyder just made a film about it. And also, when you make a movie, the first thing you do is storyboard it. And if you've ever seen a comic book, the panels end up basically as storyboards. So it should be a natural fit. So what exactly does it mean that the Watchmen might be unfilmable? Is this just mystical and pretentious nonsense? Well, maybe. But there's a few things that we need to keep in mind on the subject before we throw that theory away. Here's a prime example of a story that was made for comics only. This is Watchmen #5, Fearful Symmetry. Now, Rorschach plays a dominant role in this story, and of course his symbol is the Rorschach blot. So stick with me for a bit here. The Rorschach blot is a psychological tool of dubious value in which your therapist sprinkles a few dots on a page, folds it in half, and voila, you've got your mirror image blot. Then they charge you $300 an hour to look at it, and your therapist evaluates your mental state by what you see in the picture. This one, of course, being Angelina Jolie and Kate Beckinsale rolling around wearing nothing but hot fudge sauce. That's not what you saw? Moving forward. What's really amazing about Fearful Symmetry is that if you pay attention to the panels as a whole, you'll see that the themes and the images from one side of the book mirror each other as they head towards the center spread. So the comic book story, Fearful Symmetry, makes a perfect Rorschach blot. Okay, I want this film to be good, and I think it will be. But Fearful Symmetry is part of what makes The Watchmen, and you just can't film that. I think director Zack Snyder said it best himself in a G4 interview at San Diego Comic-Con. He said, "I think the best that I can do is make a 3-hour commercial for the comic book, and if I do that, I'm happy with it." Should be a really good commercial, though.
Alan Moore first considers film adaptations when 1989's Return of the Swamp Thing is released. He perceives it as strip mining and butchering concepts from his comparatively thoughtful work.
And I decided at that point that things that were meant to be read as comic books didn't translate that well into film.
Things start to really go sideways with From Hell. Tim Burton turned Moore's alarmingly complex police procedural into a Johnny Depp tries to save the whore with a heart of gold story. Feel free to vomit here if you wish. And at this point, Moore decides to officially take a hands-off approach. He neither endorses nor castigates adaptations of his work. He simply won't talk about them. And then came LXG. At this point, Alan Moore takes a radical philosophical shift out of the blue. He decides that in the public's mind, he's indelibly linked with these films in people's minds, and he doesn't like it. So when 20th Century Fox made The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in 2003, the guy was already in a foul mood. And then some studio execs claimed that Moore stole his ideas from a 2-bit screenwriter, and things really got crazy. Moore endured 10 hours of interrogation defending his claim as the original author, and then a Fox exec sent out a stream of joke emails claiming that Moore did steal them, which was super funny.
You can always tell the Hollywood jokes. They're the ones who aren't funny.
And that was the end of the hands-off policy. Moore wanted nothing to do with Hollywood, period. He wouldn't take a dime of movie money and demanded his name be removed from any film adaptation of his work. So when it came time for the royalty checks to be handed out for the Keanu Reeves Constantine film, Moore requested his share be distributed to the other creators and that his name not be attached. And they did. And it wasn't. So all was well. And then came V for Vendetta. The Wachowski brothers decided that they were going to get Alan Moore's blessing on their V adaptation no matter what. Moore politely told them to go hang and keep his name out of it. So naturally, Joel Silver called a national press conference and told everyone in the world that Alan Moore was on board, couldn't be happier about the project, and would be contributing input on the film. And this had an already testy Moore in really ill humor.
Okay, so imagine that you're Alan Moore, and Hollywood's already burnt you several times at this point. They keep butchering your work, they keep spreading lies about you, they've indirectly had you in an interrogation room for 10 hours over some ridiculous lawsuit, and at this point, all you want to do is be left alone. You could not be more clear or consistent on that point. And they can't even get that right.